Willie Mae Wallace fell in her kitchen at 5:23 in the morning, both hands still gripping the handle of a pot of grits going cold on the stove. Nobody heard her fall. Her house sat 57 yards from the nearest neighbor, past a stand of pines. The man who found her wasn't her son. Her son was 387 miles away, in a conference room in Atlanta, going over the final numbers on a contract worth $11,390,000. The man who found her was Otis Dukes, 46 years old, driving past her place at 5:23, that morning the way he had every morning for 22 years, in a faded green Ford pickup, with a marbled composition notebook folded in his jacket pocket. Nobody had ever read that notebook all the way through. Verna had seen it 100 times, tucked in his jacket pocket, worn soft at the corners. She had never once opened it. Otis wasn't Willie Mae's boy. Otis was high school friends with her son, a man named Terry Wallace, who lived in Atlanta now, who wired money home every month, without ever being late. Otis was also friends with Mike Boyd, who taught math at a school outside a little town in Wyoming, who always said he was coming home, and always believed it when he said it. All three of them got into college the same summer. Only Otis never went. What was written in that notebook, nobody knew. And this time, with Willie Mae in the county hospital, whether Terry and Mike would finally come home at the same time, after more than 20 years of never once coming home together, nobody knew that either. Before we continue, drop a comment with what time you're watching this, and where in the world you're from, and don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The summer of 1995, 3 boys from the same stretch of road outside Sardis, Mississippi, took the college entrance tests, within a week of each other. Terry applied to Jackson State for business. Mike applied to Delta State for education. Otis applied to Mississippi State for mechanical engineering. The 3 of them had been friends since 6th grade, sat in the same row for 7 years straight, Terry, Otis, then Mike, left to right, and nobody could say any more who'd claimed that seating order first. The summer after 8th grade, all 3 of them walked 4 miles down to the creek to go swimming instead of going to summer school, got caught by the teacher, and spent a whole afternoon standing out front of the school as punishment. Not one of them ever told on who'd talked the other 2 into it. Senior year, they studied together most nights at the county library, until it closed, then kept going under a flashlight on Otis's porch, because the library's air conditioning never amounted to much in August. Terry was strongest in math, and tutored the other 2, Otis carried them through science, Mike carried them through English, taking turns teaching each other. More than one night, all 3 of them fell asleep at that porch table, woke up to the rooster next door, and had to run the whole way to school to make first period. The acceptance letters came back the same week in August. All 3 got in. The letters got pinned up on the corkboard at the little country store on Marks Fork Road, side by side, the same Saturday morning. Folks around there said it was the first time in a long, while 3 boys off that same road had all gotten out at once. Otis never went. 11 days before his letter came, his father, Sam Dukes, was out back spraying the tomatoes, when he went down in the dirt. Nobody was home to see it. Otis's mother had died of a fever when he was 9 years old, back before anybody in the family owned a car reliable enough to make the 26-mile drive to the hospital in time. Since then it had just been the 2 of them. Sam was rushed to the county hospital that evening. The doctor called it a mild stroke, said it was a blessing they caught it as fast as they did. The left side of Sam's body never came all the way back. His left hand couldn't hold a full coffee cup, after that, not steady, not ever again. Otis stood outside that hospital one whole morning, with his acceptance letter in his hand, and never went in. He folded the letter into 4ths and put it in his shirt pocket. He never sent in his enrollment forms. He never told anybody why. People around there figured it out on their own, and nobody ever asked him twice. 6 months later, Otis reopened his father's old repair shed, which back then held 1 hand pump, 2 pairs of pliers, and a coffee can of loose screws. He learned small engine work from a man at the county seat, traded 4 months of free labor for the lessons. 3 years after that, he taught himself wiring, because the only other man in the area who'd climb a roof to fix a downed line after a storm was 81 years old. The shop never had a sign out front. People just called it Duke's Place, after his daddy. In 1999, Otis married Verna Lee Simmons, whose people farmed a stretch of land 2 roads over. There wasn't a limousine at that wedding. They rode to the church in 4 pickup trucks, and a borrowed Buick. 2 years after that, Sam Dukes passed, in November, after a second stroke. The funeral lasted 3 days, the way it was done around there. After the funeral, nobody from outside the county called to check on Otis. Nobody had a number to call, because up to that point Otis had never once left town long enough for anyone to need one. From then on, Otis was the only one of the 3 still living on that road. Leon Wallace, Terry's father, died of liver cancer in 2004, 1 year after Terry had graduated, and started at an export firm in Atlanta, still on probation, still not making enough to fly home in time. He missed his father by 4 days. After that, Willie Mae lived alone. Otis stopped by her place regularly, not every single day, but never a week went by without a visit. He patched her roof after every bad storm season. He changed bulbs when they burned out, replaced wiring the mice had chewed through. In 2007, when Willie Mae survivor benefits got held up 42 days, over a paperwork mix-up at the county office, Otis fronted her $26 a week for groceries out of his own pocket, never told Terry, never asked for it back once the check finally came. Herman and Ruth Boyd, Mike's parents, lived about 208 yards from Willie Mae, on the other side of the drainage ditch. Mike taught at a school outside Ten Sleep, Wyoming, 1,641 miles away, the kind of place where the mountain pass shut down more than once a winter, and the nearest airport was a 2-hour drive. After rent and what he sent his parents, Mike's teaching salary left him barely enough to get home more than twice a year. Herman had bad knees starting at age 63. Whenever the weather turned, he couldn't make it out to the porch on his own. Otis came by and walked him out to sit in the sun every afternoon for 4 straight months in the winter of 2011, while Ruth was in the hospital in Oxford having her gallbladder taken out. Nobody asked Otis to do that. Otis never mentioned it to anyone either, not even Verna. In 2013, the county reopened Willie Mae's survivor benefits file for review, and the paperwork required a direct family member to sign off in person at the county office, during business hours, across 3 separate appointments, after the first 2 got bounced back for a missing signature. Terry couldn't get the time off, called and asked Otis to handle it, even though Otis wasn't kin. Otis got a handwritten power of attorney notarized, drove to the county seat 3 mornings running, losing a half day of shop business each time. The clerk kept asking what his relation to Mrs. Wallace was. Otis just kept saying, "I'm looking after things for her, ma'am." By the time it was done, Willie Mae's monthly benefit had gone up $47. Otis never charged a dime for his gas, or his time, and never brought it up when Terry called to say thanks, over the phone. That same year, the Wallace family held its annual homecoming at Mount Zion Baptist, the kind of gathering where every branch of the family was expected to send someone to stand up front and be recognized. Willie Mae had nobody to stand for her side, since Terry couldn't make it back in time. The deacon offered to just skip over her family that year, no harm done. Willie Mae wouldn't hear of it, didn't want folks thinking her family had let go of the tradition. Otis, though he didn't carry the Wallace name, asked the deacon's permission to stand in her place, wore a borrowed suit, and stood up front, through the whole recognition the way the oldest son would have. Nobody in the church said a word against it. Folks just told each other afterward that boys got more sense of family than plenty who share the blood. The year after that, Herman's uncle passed, over in the next county, the funeral falling right in the middle of the week Mike was proctoring state exams up in Wyoming, too late to change flights. Custom called for a family man to stand as pallbearer. Herman's knees wouldn't let him carry that far. Otis put on a black suit and carried in his place, stood through the whole service, without a word, and nobody asked why a man outside the family was standing, where a son should have stood. Once it was over, he went home, changed clothes, and opened the shop back up, that same afternoon like nothing had happened. In 2006, Verna gave birth to their first child, a girl they named Angela. Everybody called her Angie. Otis carried the baby over to show Willie Mae first, then walked over to show Herman and Ruth. Willie Mae held the baby's hand and said she had Sam Dukes' forehead. Otis didn't answer. He just smiled. That night, the phone at Otis and Verna's house never rang once. Terry was in Atlanta, closing on a deal. Mike was 300 miles from a working cell tower, grading finals during a snowstorm that had knocked the signal out for 3 days straight. Nobody called. Otis didn't wait around for it. He'd learned a long time ago not to. Money was the only thing Terry knew how to send home faster than he could send himself. Terry studied business at Jackson State, graduated in 2003, took a job with an agricultural export company in Atlanta. His first year, he made $1,800 a month and split a 2-bedroom apartment with 3 other guys off Campbellton Road. By 2015, Terry had his own company, shipping soybeans and cotton overseas. By now, his company had 37 employees, an office in Buckhead, and a 4-story house looking out over a golf course. Every month, on the 25th, Terry wired $350 into Willie Mae's account. Never late. Never short. 19 years straight, without missing a single month. But from the year his father died to the year Willie Mae fell in her kitchen, Terry came home 11 times. None of those visits lasted longer than 4 days. Some years he didn't come at all, just sent extra at Christmas, more than usual, like it could make up the difference. Terry wasn't a cold man. Terry believed that, if he sent enough money, his mother would be all right. That was the lesson his whole career had taught him, that any problem, sooner or later, could be solved with a large enough number. For Willie Mae, that number was never enough, because what she needed was never money in the first place. The year Willie Mae turned 75, Terry had a ticket booked for 3 days, before her birthday, a rare thing, planned 6 weeks out, hotel and rental car and everything. 2 hours before his flight, sitting at the gate in Atlanta, his phone rang. A buyer in Rotterdam wanted to move the signing up, said if Terry couldn't be in the room Thursday morning, the deal was going to a competitor instead. Terry sat at that gate for a long time, ticket in one hand, phone in the other. He called his assistant, had her cancel the rental car and the hotel, and got back on the train to his office instead of boarding. He called Willie Mae that night to explain, said he was sorry, said he'd make it up to her, said maybe he ought to just go ahead and hire somebody to help out around the house, since he clearly couldn't be counted on to show up himself. Willie Mae said, "That's all right, baby, business is business." She said it the way a person says they'll find a contractor. Terry never did hire anybody that year. The idea just sat there, something he meant to get around to, the same way he meant to get around to a lot of things. He flew to Rotterdam instead, signed the deal, and 2 weeks later a florist delivered a birthday arrangement to Willie Mae's porch, 3 days late, with a card that read, "Love you mama, sorry I couldn't be there." Willie Mae kept the card in a kitchen drawer. She never threw it away. She just never brought it up again either. One time, in 2019, Terry came home for his father's memorial and stayed 3 days. The first night, he sat with his mother on the porch and pulled out his phone to show her pictures of the new house in Buckhead, pictures from a business trip to the Netherlands. Willie Mae looked at all of it and nodded, said it was beautiful. Then she asked how many days he had. Terry said 3, "Mama, gotta fly back Monday, big shipment coming in." Willie Mae didn't ask anything else. She got up and went inside for more sweet tea. That night, Terry slept in his old room, the same twin bed still against the wall, just shorter than he remembered. The next morning, before Terry was even awake, Willie Mae had been up, since 5, making a pot of banana pudding, the thing Terry used to beg for, as a boy, leaving it in the icebox, and telling Otis to swing by and take a bowl home to Verna, and the kids, the rest saved for whenever Terry called, so she could tell him she'd made it. Terry flew back to Atlanta on schedule, never thought to ask what time his mother had gotten up to make it. Willie Mae never brought it up either. 3 weeks later, on a video call, she mentioned it, said she'd made banana pudding, that time he was home, and he'd gone, and forgotten to even try it, said Verna, and the kids ate the whole pan. Terry laughed, said next time he'd have some. That next time still hadn't come. Terry always meant to bring his mother to Atlanta to live with him, just as soon as the business settled down a little. He'd been meaning to for 18 years. 1,641 miles of mountain road is the kind of distance that turns love into a promise. Mike graduated in 1999, took a teaching job at a school outside Ten Sleep, Wyoming, in the shadow of the Bighorn Mountains. He meant to teach there 2 years, and transfer somewhere closer to home. By his third year, he'd married a local woman, who taught art at the same school, and he stayed. By now, he'd been teaching there 24 years. Mike taught algebra to a classroom of 11 kids, that year, ranch kids mostly, some who rode 40 minutes each way on a bus, that cut through 2 unpaved roads to get there. He kept a coffee can of pencils on his desk for the ones who never had one, never made a show of it, just set a pencil down on a desk, without a word, if he noticed somebody digging through an empty backpack. One February, a boy named Cody Fetter, quiet, failing every test, stayed after class to ask why negative numbers even existed, if you couldn't hold -3 of something in your hand. Mike kept him, after school twice a week for 6 weeks, no extra pay, working through it, with bottle caps on the desk, this many here, take away more than you've got, and now you're in the hole. By April, Cody passed his exam, with a 78. He never thanked Mike for it. He just started sitting in the front row instead of the back. That was most of what being a teacher out there felt like, hours nobody saw, spent on kids nobody back home had ever heard of. It was also most of why Mike had never quite managed to leave. Mike's salary, after the mortgage, and his daughter's braces, and his wife's arthritis medication, left him around $160 a month to send his parents. He sent it every month, even when it wasn't much. He called Herman and Ruth every Sunday morning at 7 o'clock sharp. The calls ran 9 minutes on average. Every time Herman complained about his knees, Mike would say, "Let me see what I can work out, I'll come this summer." He meant it every time he said it. He believed it every time he said it. But every summer had a reason. The summer of 2021, it was the pandemic, the mountain pass closed to non-essential travel. The summer of 2022, it was his oldest getting ready for state testing, needing him home to help her study. This past summer, the district assigned him to teach summer school, and he couldn't get out of it, because the whole county only had 3 math teachers left. Every reason was real. Not one of them was an excuse. But added up, over 24 years, Mike made it home 14 times. The night after, that last phone call about the summer school assignment, the one that meant he wouldn't make it home, that year either, Mike sat alone in his truck in the school parking lot, after everybody else had gone home, snow coming down steady in the headlights. He'd told Herman he was sorry, told him next summer for sure, hung up, and just sat there a long while, engine running for the heat, watching the snow pile up on the windshield, until the wipers could barely keep up. He put both hands over his face, and cried, quiet, the kind of crying a grown man does, when there's nobody around to see it, and no reason to stop it early. He didn't know exactly what he was crying about. His father was fine. Nobody had died. It was just the weight of another year gone by, another promise he'd meant every word of, and broken anyway. After a while he wiped his face, put the truck in reverse, and drove the 11 miles home, through the snow, same as any other night. His wife asked if everything was all right. Mike said, "Yeah, just tired," and went on inside. Mike always meant to put in for a transfer closer to Mississippi, just as soon as his oldest got settled into high school. He'd been meaning to for years, and the reason changed a little every year. The last time Mike made it home, Christmas of 2022, he only had 5 days, and the first 3 went to extended family, leaving just 2 evenings with his own parents. The last night, Herman pulled out an old ledger, where he'd logged every dollar Mike had ever sent, said he was keeping it, so things could be split fair, with Terry someday. Mike waved it off, said, "Daddy, don't worry about that, what I send is a gift, not a loan." Herman didn't argue. He put the ledger back in the drawer, and never brought it up again. Before Mike got on the bus back to the airport, Ruth pressed a bag of fried pies, and a jar of chow chow, into his hands, told him to take it up north, so he wouldn't miss home so bad. Mike stood at the bus station holding the bag, watching his parents wave, both of them smaller, and more stooped than the last time he'd been home. The bus pulled out, and he kept looking back, until the road curved, and they were gone. He didn't cry on the bus. He just stared out the window for the first 4 hours, wide awake, even though the trip home took 14 hours altogether. Staying is the kind of love nobody ever asks, when it's supposed to run out. Verna married Otis at 21, from a farming family 2 roads over that worked 4 acres of cotton and kept a few hogs. She never went to college, though she'd been accepted into a nursing program at the community college in Senatobia, because that same year her younger brother got hurt bad in a car wreck and needed money for his leg. She gave up her spot for a bank loan to cover his hospital bills. As a young wife, Verna helped Otis mind the shop on the afternoons he was out doing electrical work, kept house, and starting in 2007, helped look after Willie Mae on the days Otis was busy, cooked an extra plate to carry over to Herman and Ruth whenever Ruth wasn't feeling well. She did all of it, without anybody asking, same as her husband. For 20 years straight, Verna made at least 1 extra plate at every meal, in case somebody in one of those 2 houses needed it. Added up, that came to more than 7,300 meals. Nobody ever counted, except Verna, and she only counted once, the year she got sick enough to have nothing else to do but lie there and count. In 2012, Verna's own mother, over in the next county, broke her arm in a fall, and needed help every day for 6 weeks. Verna split her time, mornings at her mother's, afternoons cooking for the 2 families that weren't hers by blood, evenings minding the shop, while Otis was out on an electrical job. Some days she forgot to eat her own lunch, only realizing it while clearing somebody else's empty plate. Her mother, lying in bed one day, asked her, "Why do you run yourself ragged over other folks like this, when your own mother's laid up right here?" Verna didn't have an answer for that. She just smiled, changed her mother's bandage, and went back to the stove. 6 weeks like that, and Verna lost 9 pounds. Nobody noticed, not even Otis, until her clothes started hanging loose, and one morning she went lightheaded hanging laundry on the line, had to sit down in the yard a full minute before she could stand back up. She never told anybody about that morning, not even when Otis asked why she'd been looking so pale lately. She just said it was probably the heat. Verna had Angie in 2006, and a son, Curtis, in 2009. She raised 2 kids, helped her husband look after 2 families that weren't hers by blood, and worked part-time at the County Head Start Center 2 days a week for $166 a week. In 2016, Verna passed out in the kitchen making supper, run down, blood pressure dropped. The doctor at the clinic told her she was working herself into the ground, needed at least a month of rest. She rested 4 days, then got back up to cook, because Ruth had taken a turn for the worse that same week, and nobody was going to carry a plate over if Verna didn't get up and do it. Otis never knew that his wife had once, on one particular evening that year, sat out on the back steps looking across toward Willie Mae's place, and wondered, if she ever fell in her own kitchen like that, who would be the one driving past at 5:23 in the morning to find her? Nobody answered that question, not even Verna. She stood up, went back inside, and kept cooking. The morning Willie Mae fell, Otis was on his way to drop off a generator he'd fixed for a family up the road. He swung by Willie Mae's place like usual, just to leave a bag of biscuits she'd asked him to pick up the day before. The door wasn't locked. Inside, Willie Mae lay on her side by the stove, the pot of grits still simmering on the burner, her left hand curled up tight, one side of her mouth pulled down. Otis turned off the stove first. Then he called for an ambulance. The county ambulance took 22 minutes to get there, because the road into that end of the county was torn up for repairs, and the driver had to loop around by the old bridge. For those 22 minutes, Otis knelt beside her, kept her head turned to the side the way he'd learned in a free first aid class the county health department had run one year, 3 evenings, he couldn't even remember which year anymore. He called Terry at 5:34, before the ambulance had even arrived. Terry was at the gym in his building, didn't pick up the first time. The second time, he answered, still out of breath. Otis said, "Your mama's had a stroke, we're waiting on the ambulance now." Terry went quiet for 3 seconds, then said, "I'll wire the hospital money right now, whatever room's the best one, put her in it, I'll try to get a flight out this afternoon." That afternoon, Terry never made the flight. The contract signing got moved to that same morning, and there was no way to push it back again. He wired $12,000 for hospital costs, before 10 o'clock. Otis called Mike at 6:20, once Willie Mae had already been taken to the county hospital. The signal out, where Mike lived cut in and out, took 3 tries to get through. Mike listened, then went quiet even longer than Terry had. He said, "Let me put in for leave, it'll probably be 2 days, before I can get a flight worked out. The pass gets rough this time of year, flights out of here get cancelled all the time." Those 2 days turned into 6. That night, after Willie Mae was admitted, Otis got home at 11, still smelling like rubbing alcohol. Verna was sitting up on the porch, wide awake. She didn't ask how Willie Mae was doing. She just looked at her husband, and said 6 words, no more. "There you go again, huh?" Otis didn't have an answer for that. He went inside, changed his shirt, and headed back out, this time to the county health clinic to pick up a few more supplies. Willie Mae came home, after 19 days in the hospital, walking with a cane, talking slower than before, one corner of her mouth still drooping a little, but sharp as ever in her mind. The doctor said she needed physical therapy every day, at least 45 minutes. The county didn't have a therapist to spare, only offered one 2-hour session to train a family member. Otis was the one who sat in on that session, took notes in ballpoint pen on the backs of old calendar pages. After that, Thursday afternoons never changed. Thursday afternoon is the kind of habit that doesn't need an appointment, because an appointment is the kind of thing that can get cancelled. 3:30, Otis closed the shop early. Angie rode along, with a thermos of sweet tea, a recipe from the grandmother she'd never met. Father and daughter sat, with Willie Mae on the porch, working her left hand open and shut 50 times, standing up and sitting down 10 times, walking the length of the porch twice. Willie Mae would complain, "That's enough for today, I'm tired." Otis never pushed, just sat and waited, poured more tea, told her some story, from the shop. 10 minutes later, she'd get up on her own, and keep going, no one having to ask twice. That June, the front steps at Herman and Ruth's place had rotted through on one corner, termites had gotten into the wood, and Herman had nearly slipped going out for the paper. Otis came by one afternoon to measure the damage, bought lumber at the hardware store on the county road for $41.12, paid for it himself, never told Herman the price. The job took a day and a half, because the glue needed a full night to set. Herman sat and watched him work, said, "You don't have to do all this, son, we could call somebody." Otis said, "I know." Then he kept driving nails. Curtis, 14 years old, that year, kept quieter than his sister, never one to sit long with older folks. He'd only go over to Willie Mae's when there was a fan to fix, or a bulb to change, and he'd head straight home once the job was done. Otis never made him sit and visit, just gave him the work, let him decide on his own if he wanted to stay longer. One afternoon, after fixing a fan, Curtis noticed Willie Mae struggling to twist open a bottle of aspirin with her weak hand. He stopped, opened it for her, and left. He never told anybody about it, same as his father. At 16, Curtis started riding along to the shop every afternoon, after school, not because anybody made him, but because he asked to. Otis taught him to patch a tire first, then adjust brakes, then finally let him near the wiring, since that part was the most dangerous. Curtis learned slower than his sister had learned to cook, but what he learned solid, rarely had to redo a job twice. Regulars around town stopped calling him that Dukes boy, and started calling him Curtis, like everybody else, the way a small town lets you know you've become somebody who knows what he's doing. Angie, 17 that year, sat beside her father, handing him tools. Otis showed her how to hold a saw, so the cut didn't wander, how to measure twice, before you cut once, the same thing his own father, Sam, had taught him on that same porch more than 20 years before. Angie asked, "How do you know how to fix everything, Daddy?" Otis said, "We didn't have money to call anybody when I was coming up, so whatever broke, you learned to fix it yourself." He didn't mention getting into Mississippi State. Angie didn't find that out until much later. During one of Terry's rare visits home, he found Curtis, then 12, taking apart an old lawnmower engine on the shop floor, grease up to his elbows. Terry crouched down, watched a minute, said, "You know you could go into engineering, design this stuff instead of just fixing it. They'll pay you good money for that in the city." Curtis shrugged, said he liked fixing things fine the way it was. Terry didn't push it, just reached in his wallet and handed the boy $100 bill, said, "Get yourself a good toolbox, a man needs his own tools." Curtis took the money, said thank you, Uncle Terry, put the bill in a coffee can he kept hidden under his bed, and went right back to the engine. He never spent that $100. 3 years later, when Curtis turned 15, and their old truck's transmission gave out, he pulled the coffee can from under the bed, and handed his father the money, without being asked, said, "Put this toward the truck, Daddy." Otis tried to give it back. Curtis wouldn't take it, said Uncle Terry gave it to him to use right, and this was using it right. The summer Angie was a senior, she got accepted into the nursing program at a university in Memphis, top of her graduating class. She also got offered a scholarship to a pharmacy program in Atlanta, staying with one of Terry's relatives, a much better deal on paper. She couldn't decide between the two. One evening, she sat with Ruth Boyd, telling her about it, asking what she thought. Ruth didn't answer straight out. She said, "When Mike left, I was proud, glad he got to go somewhere and do what he loved." Then she added, "It's just that later on, some nights when the weather turns, and my joints ache, I lie there alone, and wish there was somebody's child close by, the way Otis is close by." Ruth never told Angie whether to go or stay. She just told her that, then got quiet, and poured Angie more tea. Angie went home that night and couldn't sleep. In the end, Angie chose the nursing program in Memphis, 103 miles away, close enough to catch a bus home most weekends. She never said the real reason out loud to anybody, not even her father. Only once, she told her mother, "I'm scared if I go too far, there won't be anybody left to drive the sweet tea over to Miss Willie Mae's on Thursdays." Verna didn't say anything. She just hugged her daughter, short, and let go quick, like holding on too long might make her cry. One evening before Angie left for school, she was helping her father close up the shop, sorting a bin of screws back into size, something she'd done since she was small. She asked, "Daddy, do you ever regret it, not going to college back then?" Otis stopped what he was doing for a second, then said, "I don't think about it much." Angie pushed, "But you got in, didn't you, Mississippi State, right?" Otis looked at his daughter, a little surprised she knew, didn't ask who told her. He just said, "Yeah, I got in. Then Granddaddy got sick, and I stayed." After that, it just became how things were. Angie didn't push any further, sensing there was more her father wasn't ready to say. She let it be, kept sorting screws. A minute later, Otis said one more thing, not looking at her, eyes still on the parts bin. "You go on and go, don't stay behind for this town like I did. I stayed because there wasn't anybody else, back then. You're not in that spot. You've got a lot more roads to choose from." Angie didn't answer right away. She just nodded, then changed the subject, asked which bin the quarter-inch screws went in. That September, the phone rang at midnight, Ruth's number lighting up the screen. Her voice was shaking, said Herman's chest was hurting, he couldn't catch his breath. Otis woke Verna to watch the kids, was in his truck, and at their door in 7 minutes, faster than his usual Thursday drive. Herman was sitting up in bed gasping, one hand pressed to his chest, face gone pale. Otis didn't dare drive him to the hospital himself, scared of what might happen along the way, called for an ambulance, then sat beside him counting his breaths out loud, said, "Breathe with me now, Mr. Herman, in, hold it, out." Herman followed along, slowly steadying. The ambulance arrived, the first read was a possible heart attack, and they rushed him straight to the hospital in Oxford. Otis rode along and back, with Ruth, held Herman's hand the whole 40-minute drive. It turned out to be a bad case of acid reflux, not his heart at all. The doctor sent him home the same day, told him to watch his diet closer. On the drive home, Herman, still worn out, told Otis, "Sorry to trouble you at midnight like that, thought I was headed on out for good." Otis said, "No trouble at all, Mr. Herman, getting up for a drive never killed anybody." He didn't mention any of it to Mike, not wanting him worrying, from so far away, with nothing he could do about it, just texted, "Dad went and got checked out, he's fine, just reflux." Mike texted back, "Thank you, Otis, let me call, and check on him myself." That call ran 23 minutes, longer than usual. That July, Willie Mae got a craving for smothered chicken the way Otis's mother used to make it, a recipe he barely half remembered. He tried it anyway, 3 times the black pepper the recipe probably called for, and the gravy came out burnt at the edges, and salty enough, that Verna had to drink 3 glasses of water, after 1 bite. Willie Mae took a bite, went quiet, then started laughing, so hard she had to wipe her eyes, with her sleeve. She said, "Boy, you cook just, as bad as your daddy did." The whole table laughed along, even Verna, who'd been a little put out about wasting the chicken at first. It was the first time in months, that laughter had rung out of Willie Mae's kitchen loud enough for the neighbors across the ditch to hear it. The day of Angie's white coat ceremony at the start of nursing school, the whole family made the drive to Memphis, Willie Mae riding along in a wheelchair van, Herman coming too, moving slow with his cane, the farthest either of them had traveled in years. Mike watched over a video call, from Wyoming, catching only a shaky, half-frozen picture of his best friend's daughter standing in line in her white coat. Terry sent flowers straight to the auditorium, a big arrangement, expensive, delivered 30 minutes, before the ceremony started. Angie held the flowers, smiling in the family photo afterward. In that photo, there was no Terry, no Mike. There was Otis, there was Verna, there was Willie Mae in her wheelchair, there was Herman, and Ruth standing on either side. Nobody said out loud that it looked strange. Back home, that was just how things were. That storm season, 3 tropical systems rolled through the county inside of 1 month. Otis rebuilt Willie Mae's fence, where it had blown down, re-secured Herman's roof panels, pumped standing water out of both yards, and drove to the pharmacy in town for Ruth's arthritis medication whenever the roads flooded too bad for the regular delivery, all of it inside 9 straight days. He never closed the shop a single one of those days, just shortened his hours. That stretch cost him some. 2 regular customers, tired of the shorter hours, started taking their mower repairs to a shop, over in Batesville instead. Otis noticed the drop in the register, that month, didn't mention it to Verna, just started staying open a little later most nights to try, and make up the difference. On the worst night, water rose up to the second porch step at the Boyd's place, and Otis waded in chest deep to hoist their refrigerator up, onto cinder blocks, so the motor wouldn't short out. Ruth stood on the bed, hollering, "Forget it, Otis, it's too dangerous, get up here." Otis kept waiting, called back, "Just a little more, Miss Ruth, almost got it." People asked why he didn't take a few days to rest. He didn't. After the 3rd storm passed, the community held a meeting at the church fellowship hall to tally the damage, and apply for county assistance. The deacon reading off the list of hardest hit homes mentioned Willie Mae's place, and the Boyds, added off to the side, Good thing Otis was around, or both those houses would have flooded clean through. A few heads nodded. Otis sat in the back, didn't say a word, just kept writing down damage figures to help the deacon, something he always ended up doing at these meetings, since his handwriting was the clearest. Nobody put forward any kind of recognition. The meeting broke up, everybody went home. Otis locked up the fellowship hall, drove past Willie Mae's on the way home, saw her light still on, stopped in to check the new roof patch, before heading home for good. One afternoon, Ruth wrapped up a batch of fried pies, the kind Mike's wife loved whenever she visited, and asked Otis to find a way to ship them out to Wyoming, through a trucking contact a friend at the feed store knew. Otis arranged it himself, packed them careful in a cooler, with ice packs, wrote out the address clear, called ahead so Mike would be at the depot in time, before they spoiled. The shipment took a day and a half to arrive. Mike texted back that his wife had cried eating them, said it was the first time in forever she'd tasted the real thing. Ruth, hearing that from Otis, didn't say much, just smiled and said, "Well, that's all that matters then, however much trouble it took, long as she enjoyed it." That kind of thing happened a few more times, over the years, a different dish each time, sometimes preserves, sometimes a pound cake at Christmas. Otis never once turned down being the one to arrange it, even though it always meant tracking down a truck, packing it right, and timing everything just so. Christmas that year, Terry sent home a big box, everything in it, boxed candy, a bottle of good bourbon, a fat envelope of cash. The box arrived 2 days before Christmas, delivered straight to the door by courier. Terry called on a video chat at 8 that evening, talked to his mother for 6 minutes, before the call dropped, from fireworks jamming the signal near his building. Mike called at midnight, right on schedule like he'd promised, but the call kept cutting in and out, because heavy snow up in the mountains had knocked out a relay tower. They'd catch half a sentence, lose it, call back, catch another half. Finally Herman told his daughter-in-law, "Just hang up, this is more trouble than it's worth." And Otis, same as every year, brought his whole family, Verna, Angie, and Curtis, over to ring in the new year at Willie Mae's place first, then over to Herman and Ruth's right after, same as he had for more than 20 Christmases running. Nothing special happened that night. It was just one more Christmas, same as all the ones before it. That was exactly what made it special. The year Willie Mae turned 80, the family didn't throw a big to-do the way some folks did, because Terry couldn't get back in time to stand up front the way tradition called for, the oldest son leading the toast. Otis, not being her son, couldn't stand in for that part. He just quietly got everything ready anyway, set out a plate of her favorite cornbread, bought her a new shawl, dusted off the family pictures on her mantel, that morning, so at least there'd be some feeling of a celebration in the house, even without anybody standing up front. At noon, Terry called on video, the whole family gathered around the phone, sang happy birthday, through the screen. Willie Mae sat in the middle in her good church dress, smiling, thanking everybody, her words still a little slurred, from the stroke. After the call ended, she sat quiet a minute, looking at the cornbread Otis had made, and said to Verna, who was tidying up nearby, "If Terry could have just come home for one meal, sat down and eaten, with me, that would have been plenty, wouldn't have needed any of the rest of it." Verna didn't know what to say back, just told her, "I'll tell him, Miss Willie Mae, I bet he'll work it out to come next year." Willie Mae nodded, didn't say anything more, knowing that was the same thing said every year, and every year it still hadn't happened. That March, Herman had knee replacement surgery at the hospital in Oxford. Otis drove him there in a friend's car, stayed 3 nights straight, sleeping in a plastic chair by the bed. The second night, Herman woke up hurting, saw Otis still awake, notebook out, writing something under the hallway light. Herman asked, "What are you writing?" Otis closed the notebook, said, "Just keeping the shop's books, Mr. Herman." Herman didn't ask anything further. The next morning, before they wheeled him back for surgery, Herman took hold of Otis's hand, and said, "You don't have to work yourself this hard for us, son, we can call a nurse, if we need something." Otis said, "I know." Herman had heard Otis say that same thing to him more times than he could count, over the years, but this time, for some reason, his eyes stung. He didn't say anything else, just let the nurses will him back. The surgery lasted an hour and 45 minutes and went fine. Herman stayed 5 more days learning to walk again, with a walker. Otis closed the shop for all 5 days, had a fellow mechanic named Dale Prentice, who ran a place, over in the county seat, cover his regular customers, so nobody was left stranded. He walked Herman up and down the hallway, 2 laps every morning, 2 more every afternoon, exactly the way the physical therapist had told them to. The day Herman went home, he made it 12 steps, from his bed to the door on his own, no hand on the wall. He stopped, turned to Otis, and said, "This reminds me of teaching little Otis to ride a bike, way back. Just as patient then as you are now." Otis smiled, didn't say anything, just helped him out to the car. 2 years after the morning Willie Mae fell in her kitchen, on a Saturday in March, Otis was up on Ruth's roof, fixing a panel that had blown loose in a windstorm the night before. He lost his footing, didn't fall all the way to the ground, just caught the side of his head on a support beam, and lay unconscious on the roof for nearly 10 minutes, before Angie, home for the weekend, went looking for him, when he didn't come down for breakfast. Otis was taken to the hospital in Oxford, diagnosed with a mild concussion and a cracked rib. Nothing life-threatening, the doctor said, but he needed to be watched for 48 hours. Angie called Terry and Mike that same afternoon, less than 10 minutes apart. This time, both of them came. Terry caught the first flight out the next morning, got to the hospital by 9:20, still in his work shirt. Mike put in for unpaid leave, drove through the night, arrived a little before 10, eyes red from no sleep. For the first time in more than 20 years, all 3 of them, Otis, Terry, and Mike, were standing in the same room, at the same time. Otis woke up that afternoon to 2 familiar faces sitting on either side of the bed, both of them older than he remembered. While they waited, Angie brought up a bag, from home for her father, and inside it was the marbled composition notebook, folded in fourths, held together by a rubber band gone brittle enough that it snapped the second she pulled it off. Terry picked it up first, asked, "What's this?" Angie said, "I don't know, Daddy's had it forever, never let anybody see inside." Nobody asked Otis's permission, because Otis was still asleep, from the pain medication. Terry opened it. The first page was dated June of 2002. The first line read, "Took Mr. Leon to the county clinic today, cost $18, no need to mention it to Terry, don't want him worrying." The pages after, that were a list, no title, running for hundreds of pages, 1 line for 1 day, 1 small thing, sometimes with a dollar amount, sometimes just a sentence. Took Mr. Herman to the hospital in Oxford, stayed the night, hard plastic chair, couldn't sleep, wasn't so bad. Miss Willie Mae told the story today about Terry sneaking off to the creek, as a boy, laughed the whole afternoon, hadn't seen her laugh like that in a while. Miss Ruth mentioned Mike, said he's probably busy this year, that's all right, maybe next year he'll make it. Fixed the roof, over Miss Willie Mae's back room, cost $40 in shingles, told her it was 10. Picked up Mr. Herman's blood pressure medicine, forgot to ask for the receipt, don't need one anyway. Mr. Herman laughed so hard at supper tonight he had to take his teeth out, first time since the surgery. Miss Willie Mae slept clean, through the night last night, first time in a month, didn't have to check on her once. Verna stayed up past midnight getting the icing right on a pound cake for Miss Ruth's birthday. Curtis fixed the fan in Miss Willie Mae's room by himself today, didn't even ask me to help. Angie made a pot of sweet tea, and sat with Miss Willie Mae 2 whole hours this afternoon, didn't rush her once. Not one page added anything up. Not one page asked for anything back. There was one entry, near the middle, dated the day Angie was born, just one short line, "A daughter born tonight, 7 pounds 2 ounces, healthy," nothing else written, not even Verna's name, like that day had only been set aside to hold one piece of good news, nothing that needed counting. Angie, standing by her father's bed, read that line, over Terry's shoulder, didn't say anything, turned to look out the window for a while. Terry flipped a few more pages, stopped on an entry, from 2021, the pandemic, the road shut down, just a few short lines. Called Terry, he asked if his mama needed anything. She said no, didn't want him to worry. Truth is she'd been out of blood pressure pills 3 days, rode her bike to the pharmacy herself to get more. Terry read it, sat still, tried to remember that phone call, couldn't remember a word of it, only remembered it had been short, because he'd been in a meeting at the time. Mike read on to a passage further in, stopped, closed the notebook, set it down on the bed, and covered his face with both hands. He didn't make a sound. His shoulders just shook, slow and quiet, the way somebody's shoulders shake when they've finally been seen, for the first time in a long time, by somebody who never stopped seeing them. Terry didn't say anything. He sat still, looking down at his own 2 hands. When Otis finally came all the way to, and saw the notebook lying open on the bed, he just looked at it a moment, didn't reach for it, didn't seem bothered. Mike said, "Why didn't you ever say anything, Otis?" Otis said, "I know." Those 2 words, this time, landed heavier than they ever had before. Nobody said anything else for a while. The room stayed quiet except for the steady beep of the heart monitor. Before he made that call, Terry sat alone in the hospital cafeteria for 20 minutes, with his phone in his hand, not dialing anything, just turning it over and over. Then he called his assistant back in Atlanta, and told her to clear his calendar for the rest of the week, something he hadn't done in 11 years of running the company. She asked if everything was all right. Terry said, "Everything's fine, I just need to be somewhere else for a few days." That evening, Terry stepped out, into the hallway to make a call, not to a business contact this time, but to a home care agency, asking about the cost of hiring somebody long-term to look after his mother, so Otis wouldn't have to carry it alone anymore. Mike stayed in the room, held Otis's hand, didn't say anything, just sat there, until the nurse came in, and said visiting hours were over. Angie stood at the door, looking at the 3 men. This was the first time in her life she'd seen all 3 of them in the same room together. She didn't say that out loud to anyone. She turned and went down to find her mother, sitting alone on a bench outside the hospital, holding a plate of food nobody had touched yet. Angie sat down next to her mother, didn't say anything, just opened the plate, and handed her the fork first. Verna looked at her daughter, then at the plate. She didn't say anything. She ate. 3 weeks later, once Otis was back on his feet, a woman named Pearl, from the next county over, started coming by Willie Mae's place 3 days a week, hired through a home care agency Terry had found, and paid for directly, $400 a month, straight to the agency, never routed through Otis. Otis still came by Willie Mae's every week, just less than before, no longer having to do everything alone. Thursday afternoons stayed exactly the same. There was just an extra pair of hands now. Mike, after all of it, put in for a transfer to a school back in Panola County, about 16 miles from home. The transfer got approved, set to take effect the following school year. He didn't know yet how much would really change once it did. He only knew that this time, he'd actually filed the paperwork, not just kept meaning to. A few weeks after Otis was back on his feet, Willie Mae asked him to bring the whole family by for Sunday dinner, all of them, the Boyds too. She'd been saving up the strength for it. Around her kitchen table, plates passed, sweet tea poured, Willie Mae tapped her glass, with a spoon, until the table went quiet. She looked right at Verna, and said, in front of everybody, "I want to say something I should have said a long time ago. None of us would have made it, not me, not Herman, not Ruth, without you, Verna. Every plate, every ride to the doctor, every Thursday. I know good, and well half of it was you, not just Otis." Verna didn't know what to do with that. She just looked down at her hands, said, "Wasn't nothing, Miss Willie Mae." Willie Mae shook her head. "Wasn't nothing to you, maybe. Was everything to us." Nobody at the table said anything else for a minute. Angie reached over, and squeezed her mother's hand under the table. Verna got up, said the cornbread was probably burning, and went to go check on it, though everybody at that table knew it wasn't. Otis's notebook doesn't have a single line demanding anything. There's no column for what he was owed. Just dates and small things, written out in the careful, uneven hand of a man who never got much practice writing. Terry offered to wire a large sum of money as a thank you. Otis turned it down. He said his mother and the Boyds needed it more than he did. That night, back home, Otis sat alone at the kitchen table, with the notebook in front of him. He didn't write anything new in it. He just looked at it a while, then closed the cover, wound a fresh rubber band around it, since the old one had snapped at the hospital, and set it back in the bottom drawer of the hall table, where it had lived for 23 years. Verna came through on her way to bed, saw him sitting there, didn't ask what he was thinking about. She just rested a hand on his shoulder for a second, then went on. Neither of them said anything. The only sound left in the house was the kitchen clock, ticking the way it always had. Some people leave money. Some people leave memories. And some people quietly become the reason a family never falls apart. Otis never asked to be thanked for it. He still isn't sure he wants to be. But it's worth sitting with this. 20 years of money on time, phone calls every Sunday, and always meaning to come home. Does that add up to showing up? Or does love, once somebody else quietly carries your share of it long enough, stop counting the same way, no matter how much you meant to do? And there's Verna, who set an extra plate at every meal for 20 years, without being asked, and who heard the words thank you, out loud, exactly once, 20 years in. Does one dinner table thank you settle something that size? Or does it not really get settled at all? There's no clean answer here. Leave a comment and tell us what you think. If there's an Otis in your life, or a Verna, somebody who's always there, who never asks for anything, call them today. Don't send a text. Call them. And don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow, there's another story you don't want to miss.